The world awoke to a stunning headline: Chinese icebreaker fleet enters Russian northern sea route without Russian escort. For decades, this was Russia's domain, but this December Chinese ships sailed through alone, state-of-the-art, flying the red flag. The message was unmistakable: China had arrived in the high north. The balance of power in the world's most remote region was shifting. The Arctic was no longer just Russia's backyard. For centuries, Russia dominated the Arctic, its soul, its strategy, its fortress. Moscow rebuilt its power, fielding the world's largest nuclear icebreaker fleet. But now, China's unescorted passage signals a new era. Russia's monopoly is broken, the ice is shifting, so is the balance of power. Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent shockwaves to the Arctic. Western sanctions crippled Russia's economy and cut off vital technology. Grand Arctic projects stalled as foreign energy giants pulled out. Moscow, isolated and desperate, turned to China. The No Limits partnership was put to the test. China didn't send troops, but it offered an economic lifeline, buying Russian oil and gas at a discount. Russia, proud of its sovereignty, became increasingly dependent on Beijing. China supplied technology and investment for stalled Arctic LNG projects. It was a perfect opportunity for Beijing: secure energy, gain influence, and expand its Arctic footprint. Russia had little choice but to accept. The master of the Arctic became a junior partner. Joint naval patrols and economic cooperation deepened the relationship. In the Arctic, the shift was subtle, but profound. Russia needed China to keep its Arctic ambitions alive. China used that need to advance its own goals. The war in Ukraine opened the door for China in the Arctic. Russia, in desperation, held it open. The balance of power at the top of the world was being redrawn. The Arctic was no longer Russia's alone. China was now a key player. The consequences would ripple far beyond the ice. The world's attention had shifted north. The Arctic's fate was now tied to a new alliance. China's Arctic advance is no accident. It's a patient, strategic campaign. The Polar Silk Road extends Beijing's global ambitions into the high north. Officially, China's interests are scientific and economic, climate research, shipping, and investment. But every research mission gathers data crucial for navigation and potential military use. Chinese money flows into Russian Arctic energy, ports, and railways. China is a major stakeholder in projects like Yamal LNG, gaining leverage over resources and infrastructure. It's a quiet, non-military power play. China avoids direct confrontation, embedding itself as an indispensable partner. Joint patrols and research are framed as cooperation, but each step increases China's influence. The approach is subtle. China co-opts the Arctic rather than conquers it. It presents itself as a responsible stakeholder, using the language of partnership. But the result is a growing Chinese footprint in a region once dominated by Russia. The near-Arctic state is becoming a de facto Arctic power. Its ships, money, and scientists are everywhere. Russia still holds the legal keys, but China is forging its own. The Polar Silk Road is paving a path for Chinese influence across the top of the world. The world is only beginning to notice. The Arctic's future is being quietly rewritten. China's march north is changing the game. For Russia, partnership with China is both lifeline and liability. Sanctions have left Russia dependent on Chinese investment, technology, and markets. The dream of Arctic superpower status now relies on Beijing's support, but this dependence comes at a steep price. Russia, once a proud, great power, is now the junior partner. China's economic might gives it enormous leverage. Russia sells resources at a discount and accepts terms it once would have rejected. Control over strategic territory is slipping in exchange for short-term survival. The risks aren't just economic, they're strategic. China's growing presence could constrain Russia's freedom to act in the Arctic. Joint patrols and projects normalize Chinese assets in Russia's sphere. Over time, Moscow may find it must consult Beijing before acting. This is the classic dilemma of a declining power seeking help from a rising one. The help is essential, but the strings can become chains. Some in the Kremlin worry Putin is trading away Russia's crown jewels. But with few options, Russia is locked into a partnership it both needs and fears. The gamble is high stakes, survival now, sovereignty later. The future of Russia's Arctic control hangs in the balance. The cost of dependence may be higher than Moscow ever imagined. The Russia-China axis in the Arctic has set off alarms in the West. The Arctic, once a zone of scientific cooperation, is now a front in great power rivalry. Western sanctions aimed to cripple Russia's Arctic ambitions, but pushed Moscow closer to Beijing. Now, the West faces a united front where it once dealt only with Russia. NATO has responded by expanding its presence. Finland and Sweden have joined, shifting the security map. 7 of 8 Arctic states are now NATO members. Russia stands alone. The region has become a line of confrontation, not cooperation. NATO is ramping up military exercises and reinforcing its northern flank. New radar, air patrols, and bases in Alaska and Greenland send a clear message. The Arctic is not a vacuum. This new posture complicates things for Russia and China, raising the stakes for any aggressive moves, but it also increases the risk of miscalculation. More warships and aircraft in close proximity mean accidents are more likely. The Arctic is being militarized as it hasn't been since the Cold War. The dream of a peaceful, demilitarized Arctic is fading. The region is now a critical arena in the global standoff between democracies and authoritarian powers. The cycle of escalation is underway. The ice is no longer a buffer, it's a battleground. The world must navigate this new reality with caution. Beneath the geopolitics, the Arctic's fragile environment is at risk. The region is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, opening new routes but making the ecosystem vulnerable. Increased shipping and drilling bring enormous environmental dangers. A major oil spill in icy waters would be catastrophic. Cleanup is nearly impossible. Russia's use of aging, poorly regulated tankers to evade sanctions adds to the risk. An accident could devastate pristine coastlines and wildlife. The rush to extract fossil fuels creates a destructive feedback loop. Burning them melts the ice even faster. New gas fields and pipelines release methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Thawing permafrost threatens infrastructure and releases more carbon. Russia-China projects may cut corners on safety and environmental standards. The pressure to develop quickly in a sanctions-hit environment could lead to disaster. The Arctic is being treated as a resource to exploit, not a world heritage to protect. The consequences could be irreversible. The world's last great wilderness is in peril. Amid the Arctic power struggle, indigenous peoples are often forgotten. The region is home to dozens of communities, Sami, Inuit, Nenets, whose lives are tied to the land and sea. Industrialization and militarization threaten their survival. Oil and gas projects disrupt migration routes and traditional livelihoods. Increased shipping and noise drive away vital marine life. An oil spill would be a cultural and economic catastrophe. In Russia, indigenous rights have been systematically dismantled. Advocacy groups are silenced, making it easier for state and Chinese projects to proceed unchecked. The Nenets, for example, have seen ancestral lands turned into gas fields. Promises of jobs rarely materialize. Profits flow elsewhere. What's left is pollution and fractured communities. The silent advance of China, enabled by Russia, is not just geopolitical, it's human. These communities are on the front line of climate change and resource extraction. Their culture and survival are at risk in the great Arctic game. Who controls the Arctic now? For years, the answer was Russia. But war and sanctions have forced Moscow into a risky bargain with China. China, with its own ambitions, is quietly expanding its influence. The West, led by the US and NATO, is responding with military and diplomatic force. The Arctic is no longer a zone of cooperation, it's a theater of competition. The risk of miscalculation is rising. A new Iron Curtain is descending across the ice. The region's stability, vital to the global climate, is in question. Can Russia maintain control, or will it become a resource colony for China? Can the West counterbalance the Russia-China axis without sparking conflict? The answers will shape 21st century geopolitics. The fate of the Northern Sea Route, energy reserves, and fragile ecosystems hangs in the balance. The great game has moved to the top of the world. This is more than a struggle for territory. It's a clash of visions for the future. Will the Arctic be governed by law and cooperation, or carved up by powerful states? As the ice melts, the world is watching, and the rules are being rewritten.